What's up, traders? Anthony Crudele here, and thank you for tuning in to the Futures Radio Show podcast. As you all know, I constantly talk about mental edge and trading psychology. Well, today I have an elite performance coach and co-host of the AlphaMind Podcast, Mark Randall, here to join me to talk about everything traders need to know about mental edge, trading psychology, and having an alpha mind. Futures Radio Show is sponsored by E-Mini Group. They are the world's leading and most diverse futures and options exchange. E-Mini Group's markets help individuals and businesses around the world effectively manage risk. For access to free educational tools and resources for the active individual trader, please visit activetrader.cmegroup.com. You can listen to Futures Radio Show podcast anywhere podcasts are available. But if you want to watch Futures Radio Show, you can check us out on YouTube or on my website, anthonycrudele.com. This show is also sponsored by Trading Technologies, TradeStation, and FTSE Russell. The Russell 2000 is a key benchmark for small cap U.S. stocks. Be sure to check out the E-Mini Russell 2000 future symbol RTY and Micro E-Mini Russell 2000 future symbol M2K. To learn more about FTSE Russell and their products, please visit FTSERussell.com. Mark, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, Anthony. Well, thanks for inviting me to the show from live from South London.
That was funny. When I got on your show, it was about a year and a half ago. I asked you guys, like, how was the weather there? And you guys both looked at me and you go, it's London.
You've seen Mary Poppins and those films, right? It's just foggy.
It's always the same.
No, it's it's better than the rumor.
And it's better than most of the parts of the U.S. right now, as so many people are getting buried with snow. Luckily, I'm down here in Florida, but we're not here to talk about weather. But, you know, big fan of the AlphaMind Podcast. I was on the podcast, I think it was maybe just over a year ago, and I'm a regular listener to it because I think it's absolutely important for traders to work on their mind, to work on their brain. And I love the name AlphaMind Podcast. And I want to start off with, why do you even think that traders need to work on their alpha mind, working on their mental edge?
Well, I think we're starting to realize that it's kind of been forgotten about. I think there was kind of an assumption that performance came from intuition and luck and an understanding of the market, which I think is fine. But of course, if you look at the decision-making process, it is a mental process. And if you're not tuned in and sharp and managing that process effectively, then you're going to be making dumb decisions. So particularly in rapid fire, complex, fluid environments, if you're not of the right mental state, and for example, you kind of walk at it at a very stressed state, your zone of focus and what you're paying attention to becomes like a spotlight. So not only are you not paying attention to the breadth of the market in terms of, because you're spotlighting, looking at perhaps just the bid and offer and the depth, and that's kind of like your world, and not paying attention to the peripheral where the opportunity lies. But also the decisions you're making tend to be very reactive, you're just like, you could get bored and then start trading just for the sake of it. And so you kind of lose this mental control. So I think, trader edge comes from control around self, and self as a system, understanding that we are a functional system. And the number one hack for that system is hydration. So we need to make sure we're hydrated, need to make sure we're getting rest, need to make sure we're getting access to the open air whenever we can, and taking breaks whenever we can. As a system level, at a mental level, starting to understand, well, what's getting in our way? The one thing that is likely to be getting in our way is us. If we start to be reliving what we didn't do and what we should have done, and even what I'm going to make today before we make it today, we get stuck with this almost like a mental inflammation that's just going on in the market between our ears. And we kind of start thinking that's the market, almost like it's the market of hope. where you're putting a trade on and you're just staring at a thing, hoping the damn thing goes up. And of course, hope trades not particularly good foundation. And so trader edge is kind of like a bunch of those things. And of course, I've done stuff around mindfulness in corporate settings. And it's not really that either. A lot of people think, yeah, let's get into mindfulness and we become better traders. But permanently in a state of Zen is not a good state to be in if you want to be a trader. You want to be, whilst being here and present is important and being happy is important, if you want to be in a permanent state of Zen and be happy all the time, I wouldn't suggest that as a good formula to become a trader. I think just being all right, okay, and just aware and really, really well self-managed, and managing stuff that can get in your way and making some big decisions around that. And that, if you're working in a business, could be just how you're managing interaction with emails that are grabbing your attention throughout your trading day, or getting stuck in a Zoom, for an overly long amount of time in a meeting that you shouldn't really have been invited to. We can make the decisions about how we control that. Even the way that we're getting given research. Sometimes we may get given a strategy, particularly at the professional end of the business, but it's how that's delivered as well. You just want it to the executive summary, action points, what's the trade, rather than some multi-page thing that you have to trawl through. So we have to start asking that question about what can stop us being optimal. It's ourself by not managing it. There's also these other things that in this real world we're trying to cope with that can suddenly get in our way and frustrate us and take us away from our trading time. Because if we get taken away from our trading time by our frustration, by our distraction, our frustration goes up, our stress goes up because we fear that we're missing out on the market because something's just turned up to take us away from it. So collectively, those things are about trader edge. And some of the people I've coached recently they've read the books, they've read the self-help, they've read the Wizard series, they've read all of the stuff that you think is important. But because we're all really, really different, none of them have really found the answer. So it's almost like each of us needs a bespoke solution to create that trader edge.
Well, I mean, I took a bunch of notes. I mean, you answered that question so beautifully. I was writing out a bunch of things that I agree with and things I want to talk about. But the first thing I want to talk about is a question I get a lot, and I'm sure you guys get this a lot as well, is, well, Anthony, I'm new to trading. You talk a lot about trading psychology, mental edge. I don't know what the hell I'm doing right now. If I only worked on psychology right now, I still don't know how that would make me money. So a lot of traders will say, well, how does working on mental edge make me money? You have a ton of experience in this industry, in this business. You've been in this business for quite a long time. What do you think that process is for when a trader is to the point where they actually should start working on mental edge? Is it right away? Is it once they develop a strategy? Is it, when in their timeline does this become a central focus?
Well, I was on this podcast the other day, actually, and their audience was kind of like the audience coming out of school and university to want to get into markets. And I guess stress this point that as well as making sure you go to golden source, so you go to golden source for education, you go to kind of like the Society of Technical Analysts. I know the CME's got a whole bunch of stuff online you can go and learn from that's super important. Go to a golden source to learn. There's a lot of snake oil guys out there that, suggest that they're market veterans, but I've done like 2 non-farm payrolls rather than my 430, whatever the thing is, and so, Steve and I, are practitioners in that field in terms of golden source. You're golden source in terms of what you do. The Society of Technical Analysts is kind of like golden source. So make sure to start with, you find a golden source for your base. What is going to teach you about the market and the process first, and incorporate into that a strategy for understanding the process about you. Who am I? what am I trading and why am I trading it and how am I trading it and how am I managing myself through the likely event I'm going to be entering a very turbulent world that's super emotional. If I don't manage that emotion through the turbulence and can recover rapidly from it to be able to then see the next opportunity, then I'm going to be in trouble. So yeah, I would encourage anyone starting out in markets, sort out your golden source for the, for the pure edge of the information, because you need to know that. And your sources of information, even like an appropriate calendar of what's coming out. An awful lot of people just, don't know the structure of the market and even the methodology behind order type. There's some very basic principles, but I think they're ill-learned and ill-taught in general. And I said those sources I mentioned earlier. But the concept of self, I think certainly the youngsters are realizing it's important. We're only starting to really, for those of us that have been in the market 20, 30, 40 years, some people are only starting to realize that's important now. I mean, 10 years ago, it wasn't really part of the conversation. 20 years ago, it definitely wasn't part of the conversation. You just happened to come across it through luck. And maybe you picked up some things that I did in my storyline. Mine was driven by the fact that I was getting mental blackouts and fainting attacks on a broken desk in like 86 under significant pressure. And as a broker, you kind of become a multiple trader as well, because you're looking after multiple relationships, accessing difficult markets manually, and having to come up with things to keep them involved. But also I suffered from arthritis of the spine and was on drugs to manage that. And I was getting really annoyed with the amount of drugs. So I actually spoke to my mother and she guided me into this direction of a different type of self-management, really using present moment stuff in a sort of a very practical sense of it. Even to the point of just wherever you are, just make sure you are where you are rather than stuck and living in your thoughts. And after a mechanism of applying that, I just had this sort of background confidence. So I think that also the other part of Edge is that if you can have a methodology of managing self, you have a confidence to face the unexpected. And in markets, that's pretty critical because, as you know, what's going to happen today or what's to come today has never happened before. And, so you can't plan for it. You just have to cope with it as it arises. And so if you've got some sort of toolkit of self-management, which is part of what we're discussing, is a component of your edge, then you're going to have a degree of confidence. And confidence gives you a better stress management profile. It allows you to react and respond in a better way to signals. And of course, that also fits in with trades that you've actually got live, because you need to start paying attention as soon as you got risk on. So it's the trade discovery. It's the process of managing trade when you've got risk on. And actually, something I've been discussing with some of my clients is this concept of an optimal operating temperature. So if you guys think of a temperature range, 21 degrees is just nice, right? It's just a nice temperature. If you start operating at 38 degrees, the ego takes over, which for a trade is probably quite necessary to actually trigger it into action. You probably need to elevate temperature to actually make that decision. But the most important thing is getting your temperature rapidly back down to optimal. Because if you've got risk on and your ego's totally in control, then the chances are you'll get the sunk costing, you won't manage your stops effectively, you'll ride the trade for too long, all those sorts of things. But if you get back to optimal and understand that you get these swings of your own mood and state, then I think you start to operate very differently, because you want to be fresh and ready. Once you've got risk on, you just want to be fresh and ready for whatever's showing up, rather than just running at close to 40 degrees and thinking, I'm sweating buckets, I feel stressed, I'm under pressure. Well, that's the state of a lot of people in the market, right? Because we're starting to realize that getting back to optimal is really important.
I can relate so much to what you said and when it started mattering to you. health issues for me was the same thing. I mean, most people know I had a heart attack at 36 at my trading screens, but well before that, I was really in my end of my first year, beginning of my second year, not making any money, started suffering from anxiety attacks. And at the time, I didn't even really recognize that they were anxiety attacks. You know, I wasn't passing out or anything, but I was just like, I would get, dizzy. I'd be standing there feeling like I'm going to pass out. And, eventually, nobody really even talked about anxiety. This was 20 something years ago. I mean, they did, but I started recognizing that it was. And I said, what good is it? I'm spending all these hours, countless hours at my charts. I can't tell how many. I mean, basically, I was sleeping very little, sleep deprived, which we all know that's a problem as well. Hydration, you talked about that. I learned about that later. You got to be properly hydrated, because if you're not, that's probably the number one reason you're tired. You can't be feeding off caffeine all the time. There's all these different things that came into play to where I spent 99.9% of the time working on charts, trying to find technical or statistical edge. And the mistakes I was making intraday, no matter how much time I put in away from the screens, were what was holding me back. So I would find edges, I would find things that work, and then I'd go in and I'd screw them up, because in the moment I wasn't sharp. And that's when I started realizing it's not the indicators that you're looking for. It's not the holy grail, as many people will call it, and looking for that. It's about being able to be present in the moment, minimize mistakes, capitalize on situations, because everything is going to work sometimes. Nothing is going to work all the time. And when things are working well, you better be in position mentally with your capital to take advantage of it. And that's when I started moving more towards, okay, what am I doing when I'm not at my screens? I didn't even really identify it as working on mental edge back then. I just was working on a lot of what you said today, yourself, and just getting yourself in really a stronger hand, a better position to be able to go after the markets when you're trading them. And I want to get into some specific topics here. We're going to take a quick break for 15 seconds. When we come back with Mark, I want to go over just developing that mental strength to be able to face chaos, because I think that's an important piece of this. Is in that moment, what are you coaching traders? How are you helping traders in that moment make better decisions? Because that's what it's all about. Anybody could talk about them later or when things aren't happening, but in the moment, what are they doing? Talking about why I think traders need a coach. You coach traders, and just a whole list of other stuff. So traders, will be back in 15 seconds. Hang tight.
Why did I add futures to my trading strategy? 24/7 access to diverse global markets, like wheat. Can you say growth opportunity?
We should probably harvest that.
Get S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100 by the slice. Just 1/10 of the pie. Trade the tastiest index futures, micro E-Mini options with TradeStation. Get a piece of the pie now.
Welcome back, traders. Still here with Mark. Mark, I want to start off with mental strength to face chaos. And I don't want to say that in trading it's chaos, but when markets are moving quickly, you have to make your decisions quickly, and you have to be confident in what you're doing. And as I said just before the break, you have to be present. You have to be in the moment, and you want to minimize mistakes and capitalize on things. And in order to do that, you need to be in a good mental position to be able to face that. And how do you coach traders? How are you helping traders work on that?
Well, I think the answer is quite variable. Like I say, the solutions are relatively bespoke. However, there is a consistency of things that are getting adopted. The idea of actually tuning out of the market and just, if you're just in a chair, I guess the sensation of just being in a chair and a contact with the floor and a focus around the breath for 30 seconds can be extraordinarily beneficial. And I'm not talking about, a massive amount of Zen meditation, but the concept of just being where you are. And listening is also something that's particularly powerful. So tuning into just what you can hear in like the near field and what's slightly further away has a massively soothing effect on you just managing that space between your ears. Now, even if we manage, if we do that prior to a trade, it's more likely that we'll make the right choice about the trade than the wrong choice. If we don't do that, we may choose to do things in a that very sloppy sort of, well, I guess do it. Yeah, it seems right. I'll just do it, rather than a reflection. So the mental sort of break, even though it might be 30 seconds, is that you're introducing a pause. You're starting to break the habit of you getting stuck in a thought. You might be distracted by something. It brings you back to the reality of appropriate trade setup. It can be as easy as I got this stress ball thing here, right? I just happen to have it. And I encourage these guys. I said, look, if you feel as though you're about to put risk on, have a stress ball relatively near to you and just breathe into the ball like 3 times. And as you breathe out, just release it. But write breath on it and stick it next to your screen. So you're reaching for your breath. You're reaching for it. You have a process that you're about to put risk on. Mentally, just don't make sure you're in the right state to put that risk on. Because if you're in the wrong state, if you're too hyped up about something, or you've picked up a rumor and you're doing a trade because someone else has done a trade that's totally broken out from any of your processes because you just want to join the herd and the bandwagon, having these little devices where you just check yourself for a minute and think, is this the right decision? And actually that decision and clarity comes from mental clarity rather than from a place where you have this mental noise going on. So that's one thing. And I think that's quite tangible. And it's quite cool. So I've got a whole bunch of dudes just reaching for the breath. Because if you can tie the breath to a physical movement.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's much more effective. And if they go for running in the evening, tying the breath and the motion of running to the sense of running when they're running, rather than reconsidering the day as part of the process too. And that can be, popping out for a break, during lunch. And, if you take lunch or take a break at an appropriate time during the trading day, and try to fit that. I know a guy that is in a big trading room, and his break is literally stepping away from his desk, running up 2 flights of stairs, looking at the view, just taking in the view, and then going back to his desk. So you got to use the world around you. And I've got these other guys that in their pre-market mental setup, and of course, the way you get into your day is also really, really important, because a lot of people are rolling out of bed, yes, they're hitting their screens and like, bang. Well, there's this, it's 3 guys now that I've encouraged to actually get out of their front door and go into their local environment. Now, these 3 guys are blessed with actually living in places where they got access to greenery relatively close by, and find a place that's your place. Find a place that's your spot, and just go and visit your spot in the morning. And just, if it's in nature will start to get closer to you, because it'll start to accept you as part of just what's there. And start to pay attention to the seasons, start to pay attention to the air, start to just, tune in and be curious, right? And once you're kind of like cleansing yourself. And it sounds like, oh my God, this sounds like kooky stuff, but it isn't, because you're managing you. Because in a very, very natural state, it's the stuff that you as a natural being is very, feels very comfortable in those type of spaces, because it's a natural state. But if you can use that to tune in to just being here.
Yep.
And then as you re-enter your door, turn up at your trading desk, you're in a much, much better mental state to face the market throughout the day. And if you put these little pauses in, the reaching for your breath thing, and next to your breath is water, because we'll talk forever about water. Then I think you're starting to manage yourself in a very effective way at the beginning. And we can talk later about how you end the day as well. So that's another conversation.
I love how you talked about adding something physical to that action. I talk about breathing all the time. I think breath is extremely important tying it to something that says breathe on it and actually going and grabbing it and adding that element to it. Number one, it's sitting on your desk as a reminder to breathe. And when you actually grab it, now right away your mind goes from looking at the screen to now shifting to just breathing. I can't tell people enough about how important breath is. If there's anything that I've learned about getting better with mental edge, I would put breath at the top of the list, because I am somebody, I run hot, okay? So I don't need coffee or things to get me going. When I'm in front of the markets and I'm trading, and most of you could probably relate to this, I could stand at my desk from the time the bell rings till the time the bell closes, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been here all day, and you forget to eat and you forget to do things. I mean, I used to do that. I don't do that now, and time would just go by, right? Try just standing at your desk, not looking at the markets for that period of time, or sitting and you're tired, stiff, and you've got to move. So I know what that's like to be so engaged in them that you just, everything else around you, you're oblivious to. And that's great for the hyper-focus aspect of it. But over time, I believe that you end up running thin and you're going to make the mistakes. All my mistakes have been made when I get a little bit tired and I'm not fresh. And you kept saying coming back fresh. I think that's such a big thing. Even if it's 30 seconds, you don't realize how much when you come back, how that can help you. And I want to talk about getting into the day. Then we'll get into closing the day. And there's a couple other things I want to get to. So starting the day, I think, is so important. You mentioned hydration. I did too. It's funny. I did a video on Instagram. It was a while ago. And I did something about my trading desk. And I had like 4 drinks on there. I had a cup of coffee. I have a protein shake. I had my green drink. And then I put a little bit of juice with like some of my supplements in it. And somebody goes, you have enough drinks on there? And I started laughing. And I was thinking to myself, I don't think that people understand. It's not that I want to drink all these different things. It's just that I try to remind myself to be hydrated, because I learned that the number one reason I'm tired is not because I'm low caffeine or I don't have enough energy. It's because of just hydration. And it's not just from water, it's from other things. So I think that's important. So I start my day going through getting those things together and just simply focusing on these few little things to get myself just calm. It takes me a little time to make everything and put it together. And that also helps me develop patience into the day. And then I work my way through other things to kind of just ease my way into the day. I can't just wake up and start trading. It doesn't work that way for me. You mentioned there's a process to getting into the day. Can you go over what you think is a good way for traders to start the day?
It's a great topic. And I've spoken so much to this about the guys I coach. Your day to day is really defined as to how you managed yourself yesterday. Okay. So yesterday was so getting this habitual, these breath, the pauses is super important. Letting you go every day. I mean, I've got a visualization I use just to be able to park. It's like a creative piece of meditation, but people love it. I take them to a place. I get them to identify some things that we get mental baggage, and I get them to describe them on these Alka-Seltzer tablets that they just throw into the water that's around them where I take them. And they just watch these things fizz and bubble and just disappear and just disappear into nothing. So that baggage is gone. And they just sense this positivity coming into their body. They've just got rid of that load. And it's had a transformative impact on people. So that's really very important, to be able to park your day and actually define when your day end is. Now, I know that in markets, 24/7 is a temptation. You're trading up to the point where you're cleaning your teeth and going to bed. Actually, smart guys, I think Tom Canfield recently was telling us that, he picks his little window for trading because he wants to get his life back for the rest of the day, because life is damned important to have as well. So I think choosing appropriate trading windows, which I suppose is easier if you do break up your day with these little pauses, you can you can sort of see that perhaps that actually, working till 10 o'clock at night perhaps has got some downsides to it, because you're then taking that traffic and the emotion, particularly if you have a bad trade, into the late evening, you're taking that cortisol reaction and adrenaline reaction to bed with you, and your sleep is just going to not be sleep. It's going to be very jagged. And the other thing that's important for this process is that, and I rather teach people, I tell people to do it, is that if you have a trading station, as it were, your trading place where you sit and trade, the chances are that at the end of it every day, it gets full of clutter. It gets full of scribbles and notes and stickets and stuff. Just make an effort to get rid of as much clutter as possible, particularly words, because the brain will read words over and over and over again. So if you've got a book next to you that says arbitrage and US futures next to your screen, you'll be reading the spine of that book in your glance over and over and over again. It pulls you away from what you want to be looking at, which is the world of markets, right? So to declutter your desk is really, really important before you retire. Because when you wake up to the next day and you get to your screen, you've got a nice, really clean environment, and that reflects back to how you're thinking too. You see the day as an opportunity. You've not prejudged it by something you've done yesterday that may be a negative, that you've suddenly recalled a memory as a consequence. And to combine with that, I encourage people to start the day with a blank sheet of paper. And actually, to define the process that I'm now at work, I'm getting people to sharpen a pencil. So you get a pencil, you go through a process of sharpening a pencil, and when that pencil's sharpened, you've got a clean piece of paper, you're in the market now. And one of the best traders I ever knew did that process. Started the day with a blank sheet of paper, knew how to clear clutter and make sure he came to the market clean, but with the capacity to look at the market in detail, because actually that clutter, if it's not managed, actually becomes something else that's getting in your way mentally. But the action of sharpening the pencil was really, really smart, and actually almost turning on his market savviness by that process. And as soon as he put pencil to paper, that was then his trading day. Super smart way of managing yourself, and I think it's certainly a good way to start the day in that sense.
What I find so interesting is that you tie so many things to doing something physically, like actually going and doing something. And this just reminds me so much of when I started on the trading floor, where I actually had to get up, get ready, get on the train or drive, get to the floor, put your jacket on, do your homework. Like, you had to be there before the market opened. You couldn't, because you went through your whole process of just getting there, right? And that was in its own way a meditation. What am I going to do for the day, right? Then you get there, and then you would be talking with other people. There were certain days where you maybe just went directly in the pit and just started to trade, but there is a process getting to the point where you actually started to trade. And when you were done, you walked away from the pit. So there was breaks there. And I think that people forget how this business was actually built. It was built by people actually doing things even before, not even the floor, but actually picking up the phone and calling a trade in. Mm-hmm. And there was just so much more thought being put into it, which is why I think now we're just seeing markets the way that they are. I mean, we're much more in a momentum type market now, because everybody's just jumping in nobody is thinking through things as much. And it's teaching, I think, a lot of bad habits. We'll see. Who knows? They're being rewarded for bad habits right now, in my opinion. But we'll see how long that lasts. And they're making money with it, so whatever. But just getting back to the physicality of actually doing something. Everybody's trading at home, especially with COVID. Nobody's doing anything physical before they actually get to their screens. And it doesn't have to be exercise or something. Just the things that you talked about today, I think that's so important, because that gets you in that mindset of going there and just making better decisions. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, we all have the same information. How we're processing it and how we're taking advantage of it or not letting it take advantage of us is key. And that just brings us back to, mental edge and trading psychology. So I loved a lot of things that you're talking about today. And I think that these are they're really important. And I don't hear very few people talking about doing the physical side of stuff as much as I'm hearing you talk about it today. And I love that. Yeah. I want to go ahead. I think you wanted to say
something for that. I know, obviously, we came from floors and we came from trading rooms, and the social interconnectivity was also something that helped us to feel that we weren't alone and other people were having difficult things to do. And also there were times on the floor where you'd help somebody and you get huge satisfaction from helping someone out of a bad trade, right? And those things are really, really critical for our mental edge as well, because they all affect mood. And actually one of the things I'm looking at is one of the things that's not being discussed. We talk about positive mindset, we talk about stress management, but is anyone talking about mood? And if you think about mood, it's we can laugh and we can dance before we can talk and before we can walk. You play a baby a track 2 days old and hold them up. If you can hold them up, they'll move and they'll laugh at a smile. So our natural instinct and mood is really, really important. We can get great mood out of music. Rocking out to our own soundtrack is important. And some corporates are looking at that. And of course, it's why they play music in these supermarkets, because they think we'll get people into a better mood and they'll buy more things. But I think it's something that can be explored from a trading perspective too. And of course, The Big Short, the guy's bashing out his drum kit. And there's some truth behind that, right? There's some truth.
Absolutely.
That's kind of like a workout, and dad dancing or mum dancing to your best soundtrack is also getting you in a mood too. And I think that's all part of your edge, because if you can do as much stuff as you like to improve your edge, but if you're in a bad mood, right? If you're in a bad mood, that's your edge gone. So mood is like super important. It becomes a what do you call it? Sort of a superhero type, sort of, like part of us. We can do it as much as we like, training, but if we're in a bad mood, things are going to suck and we're going to make stupid decisions. You switch off all that other cognitive ability if you're in a bad mood. So thinking about what improves your mood and getting out in fresh air, walking with your dog and tuning into what's going on, and, whatever it is. And like I said, from a bespoke point of view, it means different things to different people. To Tom, it was getting out on the ski slopes. For others, it was, just hiking. For others, it's running. For others, it is meditation if they want to do it. But what gets you in a good mood is also part of the critical ingredient for understanding how to keep and maintain your edge.
I think it brings us back to what life is really like when you're not at the screens, like actually understanding why you do this, because most of us will be so consumed by this because it's so challenging. It's so difficult. You go out there, you give it everything you have. And sometimes a lot of times you're not getting what you want out of it. You forget how to live life. And I was definitely one of those people where it would consume me. And the worse my mood got, the more negative I got, the worse I did. And until I started living life and recognizing that the reason why I was doing this was so I could live a good life, because I think we forget that. A lot of people forget that. We get caught up in just, I got to make money today. I need to make this trade work. I need to make this happen. And as opposed to coming in and treating it more like a job, it's really, there's a lot that goes into that. I think that is one of those things that takes time. And that brings me kind of to the next thing I want to talk about is coaching. People have said, I've gotten into a couple conversations with people on social media about this. Well, what do you need a coach for? And I said, look, I'm 20 something years in this business. I've been pretty successful at it. I'd still be coached today. I would always take coaching. I will never say no to coaching. And sometimes that coaching can be intimate, one-on-one. Some of it could be just listening to like your podcast or other things. I think it depends on how you want to look at coaching. But I look at trading as, it's not about becoming a great trader. It's about how do I constantly get better, because my path has never been, straight up. It's been up and down. And I look at it and go, man, I just went through this so many years ago. I'm here again. I can't believe this. What am I doing wrong? And I don't think that an individual can always really identify what they're lacking or what they need to do to get better. I've had a bunch of mentors and coaches in my career. Explain to everybody out there, I mean, obviously you're doing coaching, but why would someone go who's making money need a coach?
Well, listen, markets at times crazy. They're unpredictable, as we know. They can kill you, as we know. They continue to offer challenges, and we often, through that process, get into habits that suddenly become the wrong habit. We start forgetting about process. And I start to look at it, from almost like a sport point of view. If we look at Tiger Woods, right? Do you think Tiger Woods still has a coach? Of course he has a coach. There's someone there saying, Tiger, you realize you're lifting up your left heel a bit too early, because he's not noticing that. And you're aiming 2 degrees left of target rather than on target. And as a concept, so you need that feedback. So it's a feedback process. And it blends in with mentoring, and it blends in with other people's perspectives, and other people that have lived through this. And of course, if you've been in the market nearly 40 years, there's a lot of rhythm that you've seen happen in the past that, and you can say, well, look, things that have worked for me under such circumstances, I suggest you may want to consider this, if you allow me to suggest it. But I think that people, it gives them space to almost think through things. It gives people a space in a safe environment to just think through what they're doing. And with a bit of help and support, a bit of reflection, a bit of mentoring, they start to understand that actually, I've drifted into this habit. I'm not paying attention to myself. I'm not, Jesus, I haven't drunken. It's like 11 a.m. and I've not had a drink of water yet. Those types of things. And I need to remember this sort of stuff, because I totally got into this other world loop that I thought was normal, and acquired all this baggage that is now stopping me trading. But I didn't realize the baggage was there until actually I've started to step back and take some perspective on it. So you need someone to guide you through that. An elite sports person, and if you're in trading, you need to treat yourself as an elite performance sport person trading.
Agreed.
The marketplace, the theater of war that markets is, as much as sort of a special forces guy. And so you've got to be managed. You've got to be driven in the right way by leadership, and that leadership, in this sense, comes from your own internal leadership, and being given guidance for that is critical. And people are beginning to wake up to the idea that actually, perhaps I've taken things for granted for too long. And whilst I'm good, if they're honest, they'll start to think, there's some things I've been stupid about. I made some stupid decisions. And it just gives them an opportunity to refine skills they perhaps have already got, but they've been kind of like lost in the blur of tragedy and losses or whatever. And of course, those things can be not just in the market, but it can be things outside of the market that might just have been difficult and need to be managed in a way of, getting people of the right mindset back into the trading role.
Yeah. And I think that because you've been through it and you've been in the industry a long time, I think sometimes people just being able to talk to other people that understand that can expose some of the things that they're actually thinking by actually having a conversation with someone who understands what they're saying. I know in this industry, it's basically like a different language. Your spouse or your friends may not understand everything that you're talking about. And I know for years, my family didn't quite understand why I was so stressed out. And over time, because they learn through you and they understand the nature of the business, that okay, so they give you a little bit more slack and you start to talk maybe a little bit more openly with them. But you really can't put a price on speaking with someone like you and helping them understand just really where they're really at. I think the one thing is that with traders, a lot of times I'm totally guilty of this, is that we think that we are somewhere, but we're not recognizing where we're really at. And that's where I sometimes will get lost, where it's like, I think I'm totally focused, things are going well, and I'll go in and I'll just do stupid things. And you're like, what's happening right now? And because I've been doing it a while, I'll correct it a little bit quicker. But for those that maybe don't understand themselves, we talk a lot about that today, going to talk with somebody like a coach and helping them work through and identify what's happening with them and where they really are right now, it puts them on the path to getting better quicker. And that's really what it is. And maybe they don't have another chance, because this business sometimes can be crude if you're not honest with yourself or where you're really at. And I think coaches and mentors have been a big part of helping me with that. 2 quick things before we get into rapid fire. I want to stay on coaching, because a lot of what you talk about with AlphaMind and everything that you guys are doing. One is, what is the number one thing that traders come to you and need coaching on, and how do you help them with it?
Letting go. Letting go of something that just gets in their mind in their mind's way for the opportunity that is meant to be there available, but they can't see it because they get stuck in this previous world. And some of it's actually where people have journaled things down, and they look back through their journal at past performance, and they come across the negative of the disaster trade, and as soon as they read it, they're back refilling that moment when they dropped whatever, and it could have been very, very painful, particularly if it stands out. And so what I've suggested is that if you do have something in a journal like that, make sure you write next to it a very positive message about what you did to kind of reset yourself after that. And what change of process did you do? What change of strategy did you do? And also on the negative thing itself, if everything else in the journal, for example, pod is size 12 font, stick it in size 8 font faint or something, so that when you do flick back, you kind of have to make an effort to look for it, because we do have a risk of getting triggered by previous negative events. And if a journal represents your memory, and you don't manage the negative stuff appropriately in the way I've just suggested, then it becomes your real life memory that you're picking in on. And it's not the journey you're looking at, it's this space in between your head that's taking you back in time to that precise moment. And it's not necessarily the trade that you remember, but you'll remember how you felt, how sick you felt, how you may have been physically sick. I mean, it's been the case, right? It happens. And so to relive that emotion again, it's not doing your cognitive ability for now any good at all. So that was one of the most significant things that come out of my coaching, that how you treat and how you manage letting go, and letting go of history by actually just being a bit sensible about it. But of course, going back to that optimal temperature point, where actually if you stay red hot on a disastrous trade that's just happened, you're going to be with that disaster without optimizing yourself back to 22 degrees or whatever that optimal temperature was we suggested. Yeah. So the idea of using the breath, reaching for the breath, getting some sort of way of accessing fresh air, tuning into somewhere else, and then bringing yourself back to the market is also super critical in terms of the ability to let go.
Last question before we get into rapid fire. You've been in this industry for a long time. You started doing the podcast, you started doing coaching. Obviously, you learned a lot throughout your career. What's something that is new that you learned from coaching and doing the AlphaMind podcast?
Well, certainly from an AlphaMind podcast point of view, Chris Camillo before Christmas talked to us about, and he was in the latest Jack Swagger Modern Day Wizards book, or Unknown Wizards book, was that he was paying attention to social trends, noticing cues, noticing, sort of retail traffic, and actually taking an investment decision based upon it. And I thought that was a very, very fresh way of thinking, and quite smart, and something that actually the youth of today, if they're looking to get into the equity market, for example, in terms of from an investing point of view, but it's sort of, trading to a sense, right? Because you can trade around. But yeah, just paying attention to the social news feed that's going on can give you great insights as to what could be an opportunity that you may want to invest in. That was a very, very interesting thing.
Yeah, for us old school guys like you and I, For me, social media, what it was originally used for me was just obviously communication, talking with people. And over time, I've learned that same thing. Doing a bunch of podcasts like I have and meeting with a lot of different traders, opening up the door to seeing what all these other traders are doing for their strategies. It really did open my eyes too. I really learned very much the same thing, that social media now is actually as much of a tool as technical analysis or fundamental analysis. I mean, just look what happened with GameStop. I mean, I'm not saying that's not part of my strategy, but if that's something you're looking at as a tool, and I'm not suggesting this, but it's just social media now is obviously having a bigger impact on things that happen. And that's an extreme, obvious example, okay? But there's so many other examples of, if everybody's liking a bearish tweet, or if nobody's liking a bullish tweet, or if everybody's liking a tweet on something that you say about the market, take note of that, because that could be an edge. So I'm with you. It's funny you say that, because it's something that I've been talking about a lot more on the show. I think it truly is social media that is a very important tool, and going forward will continue to be used, not by the newer retail traders alone, by the bigger guys. And we already know they've been scanning social media, but I think that it just becomes a more and more important tool.
That was a real wake-up call for me, because you kind of take these things for granted, but then you kind of think, it does give you the ability to pay more attention to real life, right? Because real life is where opportunities exist, and you can tangibly see that there's 50 people queuing up for that particular burger chain. You think,
Yep. Well, this has been awesome. But we are not done yet. We have rapid fire questions next, if you are ready for those.
Ready.
All right, everybody. Our rapid fire segment is sponsored by Trading Technologies. Trade the global markets with TT. They are the world's fastest commercially available futures trading platform. Now with integrated tools for advanced options trading, cryptocurrencies, and trade surveillance. Learn more at tryttnow.com. Mark, first question for you. What trader has influenced your life the most, and why?
Well, it was a trader back in the mid-'80s. It's probably one of the first clients I ever had. He understood the market not directionally. He saw the market as a vibration. And you saw a market, there was a high, there was a low, there was an open, a high, low, close to a bar chart. But he knew that there was a lot more going on within a day. And he made money out of trading a vibration of the market and understanding that the price can go through several levels at the same price. And that really woke me up to the fact that he wasn't just going long and that was it. He was one of the most successful traders I ever knew. He had a positional bias, but he was trading in and out of these segments with this bias throughout the course of the day. Because what he did, and I sent, when ADP Comtrend was like the technical system of the day, you used to have to take pictures of the screens, and there's this silver paper that cost like 500 quid a reel or something. And I was the guy that had to go through this thing and print off day after day after day of intraday stuff on stocks and sent it to him. It was inches thick, but he paid attention. So he made the effort and committed to pay attention and understood these markets to the level of seeing it as an intraday vibration. And he wanted to see to what extent markets were vibrating across the price range. And he put in the system, and I managed the system for him. And all I did was just, almost every day, you made money. I sent him these fills, and the amount of money he took out of the market was crazy and really, really consistent. And he was able to put in some things to counteract price movements that went against him as well over time. But that was smart. So it was somebody that understood the market as a vibration, not just a direction.
Never heard that before. It's pretty interesting there. What was one of the hardest things for you to overcome in trading?
Well, because I was a broker, but as a broker, you're kind of a quasi trader anyway. But it was actually seeing clarity in, the mess of panic. Obviously in 87, there was the mess. There were several panics when we started to get, fast market after fast market after fast market, for those that understand fast market, where you're having to manage, multiple clients hitting a market where no one knows the price and no one knows if you're filled or not. And there was that pressure and the importance of maintaining huge amount of self-management, just to cope with that amount of noise. But there was the emotion that came with it, because you're dealing with individuals that were also at a trader level, screaming because they were trying to make money, and we had one particular occasion, I'll just cover it very quickly, where someone put in a buy stop above the market, a sell stop below the market in a really busy market. Both would take profits, and it went stupid. It went fast market. The buy stop to trigger the trade was filled higher than the take profit. Right, this is within about 30 seconds. It then triggered the sell stop on the downside with a target level. The sell stop got triggered below the target price as well. So within about 40 seconds, he dropped on a 300 lot position. I think it was T-notes or something like that. It just shows you how dangerous markets are, because you think you've got a plan until things get stupid and it becomes fast market. And having to manage the emotion of dealing with the client, having to manage the emotion of physical trades to the market, and actually trying to work out what we've done. And fast markets are particularly dangerous, as you know. That's when I knew that I had my toolkit of self-management was working, because I was calm and measured and making the right decisions. And of course, you acquire positions as a broker yourself, because you suddenly get errors coming in. So, so brokers become traders by default, because, the error rate in futures is, 4% of notional or something, or whatever I used to hear. So you suddenly got a trade, and you're then a trader, you got his trade on, you think, oh, shit, how do I get out of this? All those emotions at the same time, when you're still trying to keep your clients happy, you need to be bloody well self-managed. And luckily I had all that kit that I had access to.
What is one attribute that you believe every trader should have?
A consciousness of their state at any one time. What state? Am I all right? That question, we ask everyone else, are you okay? But we need to ask ourselves quite regularly throughout the trading day, am I all right? I mean, we go back to water, dehydration. Have I taken enough rest? Am I taking enough pauses? Have I decluttered things? Am I tuned into the right parameters for identifying a trade? And am I trading the right thing? Because, we can switch where we trade and how we trade. So I think having that consciousness to be able to ask ourselves the question, am I all right? Am I, optimal? Because at optimal, I'm really agile. I can make great decisions and change decisions and cope with being wrong, because I can reset myself and just look at the world as it now appears in front of me.
Favorite book about trading?
I must say I do like the Swager series, because Jack Swager's because it's real life. Remember in his first book, having Tom Baldwin, who I'm sure I traded against into the board, onto T-bond pit. I like the idea that there's a real life aspect. And I guess that's where our podcasts come in too. We're talking to real life people about their experiences. So I like these case studies. I think they're curating history, and people can look back and understand people's pain, people's tweak to their systems, people's process in a really tangible way, and they can understand it because it's kind of like real life.
What's the best piece of advice that you ever received about trading?
Whoa, that's a big question. I think it's I think it's just to understand your own limits. Understand the amount that you want to put on the table as risk, and to know what that number is, and to where risk turns into pain, and to try to put anything in place to avoid getting a painful exit from a trade. So it's the concept of understanding what risk you're comfortable with.
If you had to give a piece of advice to the younger you about trading, what would you say?
I'd acquire these mindset skills much earlier than 7 years after the event. Because I think you start to learn just how critical they are in terms of clarity, in terms of learning. Because our ability to learn is also, and to retain information, is very much down to just how much mental clarity we have. And certainly I was pretty useless at school. And if you look back, it's because there's so many other distractions, and you weren't properly self-managing yourself, and, you kind of undervalued the value of education. And I think I perhaps would have valued education in a better way, although quite luckily, because of the sphere I got in, we were educated in markets with golden source essentially at the very early stages. So I really call that a piece of luck, really, than by design.
Changing things up a little bit this week with my rapid fire. So my last question for you today is, we talked a ton about AlphaMind, mental edge. What is one thing that you think every trader out there listening can do to help them work on their mental edge?
Rest, water, oxygen. So think about your system first, because you can do as much of this other stuff, but if you don't get enough rest, if you're not hydrating as you should hydrate, if you're not putting these pauses into the day, and if you're not taking a break into full bandwidth sunlight, I'm not talking about looking through the window, but full bandwidth light, and getting access to as pure oxygen as you can, then you're going to be losing it. There's no point doing the rest of the stuff. You've got to get your system right first, and do some stuff around it that best suits you. I think mood is vital, as we've come about. I think only disclosing that, really, that get into the right mood. If it means rocking out to a great soundtrack, go and rock out to a great soundtrack. Listen to humor, share banter between us, share your stories of because if you start to feel that we're all in this together and everyone had a bit of a disastrous day, you'll feel better about it yourself.
That's great advice. And it was great speaking with you today. I listen to your podcast regularly. I always learn something there. It was great to get to know you a little bit better today. Learn something from you every time I hear you speak, Mark. You're doing great stuff for the trading community. I really appreciate that. Where can the traders listening to this go and learn more about you, AlphaMind Podcast, and everything that you guys are doing?
Well, I think AlphaMind's on most channels, but our website is alpha-mind.net. We're using Steve's Twitter channel as the core channel, which is AlphaMind 101. And I feed stuff into that occasionally, but he's just got this back catalog of stuff. I guess the hell, you got the time for this? Oh, it's already pre-prepared. So he's got the engine, and we're super proud of that. But we're going to be turning up in some other quite large worlds as well, just supporting their education programs with the AlphaMind concept, where we're bringing, I guess, the sort of the realistic side of trading psychology, mindset optimization into those discussions as well. So you'll be seeing us, start to appear in other places in the relatively near future, because Fantastic. People are starting to realize that they've just not had this stuff available. It's not just about technical analysis.
Yeah. No, I think it's fantastic. So I appreciate both of you guys. Appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you so much for joining me on Futures Radio Show.
Been an absolute pleasure, Mr. Anthony Crudele. And I hope to see you again, yeah? There's so much to talk about. We didn't even cover too much about golf, and we could talk for a year.
Oh, yeah. That's next time, my friend. Thank you again.
Fantastic.
Thank you for listening to Futures Radio Show. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review on iTunes. You can listen to all of our episodes on futuresradioshow.com, iTunes,